I'm going to call this meeting of the Gloucester School Committee to order. I'll remind everybody that the mission of Gloucester Public Schools is for all students to be successful, engaged, lifelong learners. And this meeting is recorded by video and audio in accordance with state open meeting laws, consistent with the governor's orders suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and banning gatherings of more than 10 people. This meeting will be conducted by remote participation. If you're calling in on a phone, you can press *9 to request to speak. If you're watching on computer or device, there is a raise hand button that you can tip or press to request to speak. Please use either of these options during oral communications to be recognized to speak. And we'll now have a roll call of school committee members. Maria, can you do that?
Ms. Prince.
Here.
Mayor Taken. I don't believe she's here. Ms. Watson.
Here.
Ms. Weeson.
Here.
Kathy Clancy.
She is here. She is unable to do audio right at the moment, but she is listening.
Okay. Mr. Favazza
Here.
and Chairman Pope.
Here. Okay. We'll now have the salute to the flag. Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next order is oral communications. Now, I'd like to start by with a little bit of information. I got a phone call just before this meeting started from Dorothy Presser, informing me that Nan Murphy has withdrawn her application for the position of superintendent. She has accepted a position as an assistant superintendent in another district. The other thing about oral communications is that we had stated at our last meeting that we would allow public input into the search responses to the applicants of the search for the superintendent. I would like to hold that off until that item comes up on the agenda. If somebody is here and would like to address the school committee on an item other than the superintendent search, this is your opportunity. And as I said before, if you're calling in by phone, you have to press *9 to be recognized. Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to the next item. Comments from the chairperson. I guess I've already made the major comment. I would like to adjust the agenda tonight, because the main piece of work that we're going to have to do is the superintendent search and narrowing what is now 4 applicants down to 2 or 3. So I'd like to move that to the last item on the agenda and try to get through the business part of this meeting first without objection. Okay. So the next order of business is...
Excuse me.
What?
Do you have any concept of how many people are attending the meeting in hopes of participating?
There are 29 attendees at the moment. I have no way of knowing how many of them are here for the purpose. Oh, there's 31 is going up. I know that some of them are here to speak. to the superintendent search. I also know some of them may be affected by the fact that Nan Murphy has withdrawn. So that being said, if we can get through the business end of this, I believe that we should be able to get to the superintendent search part of the meeting by 8 o'clock. Okay, so our next order of business is our Student Advisory Council, and Catherine Bevins, is here to give us an update of all the happenings at Gloucester High School.
So this is my last school committee meeting because today I held my student council executive board elections. So there'll be a new student advisory board, and hopefully they'll come to the next meeting virtually. Some of you may have heard that the senior class, the GHS senior class, is doing their annual senior parade on Friday. Gloucester Daily Times has been, I can't praise them enough. They've been super great with getting everything that has to do with the seniors out. Actually, 5 of us just got featured as the hometown heroes. I don't know if any of you read that article. It's online. It was online on Tuesday, so yesterday. There was 5 of us that were featured in that. But NHS, the new NHS was inducted virtually. That was a very fun. Everyone trying to repeat after one another online was definitely not the easiest thing, but everything's going well, and it's the end of the school year, so couldn't be happier.
Any questions?
Jonathan, do you see that there's a hand raised in the attendees?
I don't. Okay. Okay. Cynthia.
Hi, yes, this is Cynthia Mahowski. Sorry, I just, when you had said about the postponing to the superintendent search to the end, I mean, 8 o'clock, that's still an hour into it, but I was expecting a little sooner. I didn't know if like you could just stick with the agenda. And I'm sorry, I didn't realize, I would have said it at oral communications had I known that the agenda was going to be switched around.
Okay.
I just didn't know if like, sorry, so I don't know the call fully, but I just wanted to say something just because I've spent many a time being on here till like 9 or 10. I guess you're not, because I see Melissa shaking her head. So I guess that's not a possibility. I don't. Thank you. Sorry.
Okay. I don't think it's going to be a problem. Our business end of the committee is, is important that we take care of this business, but there's nothing that I see that should take a long time. And, but I do understand that the part about the superintendent search may go on for quite a while. So, Samantha, you'd like to say something?
Not about this. I was just hoping Catherine Bevins was still on.
Oh.
I don't believe she is.
I just wanted to thank her for her time because she's been coming.
Yes.
We didn't really get a chance to do that yet. So
No, we didn't. Okay. All right, recognitions. Any recognitions? Okay. We'll move on to the consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda that anybody would like removed for further discussion? Joel?
Can we just discuss, pull the approval of warrants, please?
Pull the warrant.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Is there anything else? Okay, Joel, what do you want to do with the warrant?
So I was just having a little confusion as I was going through our school committee packet as to how the warrants tied in to the substance of what they were relating to. So if someone picked up our agenda and our packet and said, okay, the schools committee is authorizing, a payment of $163.28. It doesn't say, where it's going. I was wondering if there's a way to make it so that people who are wondering where the money is going would be able to, in our packet in the future, just kind of see, there's obviously a really big transfer in this one. It's like $653,000. And again, just for the ability for someone who grabs the agenda to be able to figure out where this was, and having to go dig through previous meetings or BNF meetings or something like that. That's my only kind of question, I guess, procedurally, if that's possible or if that's too.
Okay. The answer is that all of that information is in the BNF agenda and in the BNF packet, which happened last week. So if people want to see the detail, that's where it is. If you'd like to have that included in the packet, we could do that. It's
Or maybe even just a notice at the beginning, so like, I'm sure we can all, understand how to get to the backup that we need, but just trying to think of someone who grabs our agenda and starts going through it, or maybe was going through it right now, waiting for us to get something they're interested in. Even if there was just something that at the beginning of the warrants that said, these came out of BNF, or the backup is available here.
Yeah. Kathy?
I just
You're
want
muted.
to clarify that the warrant information doesn't come through our BNF. So it wouldn't be in a BNF packet. And I think a few meetings ago or a couple months ago, before the world changed, we suggested that we would have some kind of a list or a cover sheet of the nature of the expenses to accompany those warrants. And I think that's probably what Joel is asking for. So how much of the 653 was for health insurance and how much was for out-of-district transportation. So those kind of top-level items, I think, would be helpful for everybody to be able to see on the face of our school committee packet. I also want to comment on if something's in a packet for a subcommittee, like the city council, that packet information doesn't come forward to the city council packet, you have to go to the subcommittee. So those are two separate things. I just don't want to get in the habit of every subcommittee piece comes forward when it's, procedurally it should stay at the subcommittee detail and people should look for the packet. But I think that summary listing would be helpful for the average viewer to see when we're approving those warrants.
Yes, that's something that we did have a discussion about. Gary, I think that would not be a big problem to provide to the school committee when we approve the warrant.
No, we can, I can work up something and share with the BNF committee, and then they can critique it.
Okay. So I'm muted. Going back to the warrant, do we have a motion to accept the warrant as submitted?
I think it's a motion to approve the consent agenda, correct?
Well, no, the warrant got pulled, so we got to vote that separately.
Okay, so moved.
Second.
Okay. Is there any discussion? All in favor? No, I'm sorry. Roll call vote, Maria.
Prince,
Yes.
Mayor Taken,
Yes.
Ms. Watson,
Yes.
Ms. Weason,
Yes.
Kathy Clancy,
Yes.
Mr. Favazza,
Yes.
and Chairman Pope.
Yes. Okay, now we need a motion to accept the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Maria, roll call vote.
Ms. Prince,
Yes.
Mayor Tegan,
Yes.
Ms. Watson,
Yes.
Ms. Weason,
Yes.
Kathy Clancy,
Yes.
Mr. Favazza,
Yes.
and Chairman Pope.
Yes. Okay. All right. Next item on the agenda is an update on school closures due to COVID-19. And this is basically the superintendent's report also combined. So Dr. Sapphire, sir.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. We learned today in a conference call with the commissioner that guidance for a fall opening for school is going to probably come about in around 2 weeks. They have a working group of approximately 30 folks. They've got some consultant agencies working with them as well, which I'll refer to later on. In anticipation of that expectation, I thought it would be helpful to take a look at a state's plan for recovery. The Maryland plan that you see in the superintendent's report is a draft. There's nothing in here that I am in particular endorsing, no particular course of action, but rather what it does do is open up a sense of the dimensions, the dynamics, and the parameters that the district is, and all districts are going to need to review in preparation for the fall, which is probably going to come more quickly than any of us would expect. So with that said, I'm going to breeze through this. You've got a lot of business to take care of today. The major areas that this particular plan talks about have to do with some items research, not much substantiation, instructional programs, support programs, preparation and services, and then student services. Student services refers to the counselors, psychologists, social workers, student support teams, crisis management, all the rest. That particular aspect, it's a 60-page document, almost a third to a half of it, is a compilation of some of the responsibilities and roles of student service type personnel. It's just beyond the scope of this particular report, but we can refer back to it and or wait for the Department of Ed's information. The executive summary talks about some of the things, all of which are elements that we're going to need to look at. Of course, first and foremost is protection, increasing health and hygiene measures. And the first priority is protecting people, staff, students, and the rest. Ed Davis, you may know the name, former police chief in Lowell, former police chief in Boston as well, has a consulting agency. That particular agency is looking at all safety measures across the board, and they are advising and informing the Department of Ed as they put together their report as well. Social distancing and how that's going to work. Whether or not playground areas have to be marked out for social distancing. Obviously enhanced cleaning procedures and sanitation measures. It's not just going to be the custodians, students, and in all likelihood, probably teachers may be called upon to maintain cleaning procedures. Reduced class sizes, desks that, or at least the seating of students that are a minimum of 6 feet apart. That speaks to scheduling as well as the logistics within the school and the classroom. Possible moratoriums on assemblies, school dances, and school functions. In order, if there's a hybrid model and students are not coming into school on a daily basis, do districts look to art, health, and physical education to be offered remotely in order to maximize face-to-face time in reading, English language arts, math, science, and social studies. And of course, adjustments to parental involvement in school activities as well. So those are some of the elements in the executive summary. Under the research, they speak about math being the subject where the greatest likelihood of a loss, the summer slide, could possibly take place. It's not unlikely for parents to say, let's read a story before bedtime. It's rarer for a parent to say, let's work on this particular mathematical problem before I tuck you in for the night. So an emphasis on, and just a sensitivity to the fact that math can suffer under these circumstances, possibly more than the other subjects, is something to bear in mind. The Maryland plan suggests that students prefer synchronous learning for greater understanding and for comprehension and for social reasons as well. However, The plan also says that it's not the full group, full class lessons that are more directly related to student achievement, but rather the one-on-one tutoring and the small group direct instruction that can make a difference. Further research says that when it comes to working in one-on-one and small group instructions, paraprofessionals can be quite effective in assisting students and teachers in that particular regard. In terms of age, ability, and service group considerations, our lowest performing students and our youngest students are the ones that require more in-person time, according to them. And of course, to state what's more than obvious, the mental and emotional well-being of students and how we address those situations is going to be an extremely important during the adjustment period when the buildings reopen. In terms of scheduling, and again, I don't support any of these at this time until we see what the Department of Ed comes across with, although I do expect that there's going to be a lot of discretion for local districts to make their decisions. But some of the things that are being thrown around, a one-day rotation where students report to school one full day at all levels and they're provided assignments for the week, a two-day rotation. And bear in mind that staffing, and I'll get to this a little bit later, staffing can be an issue. If you're trying to distribute when students come to school, but there are certain staff members that can't come in due to pre-existing medical conditions or circumstances at home, that's going to have a direct impact on the class sizes, even if you are breaking them up, depending on the number of days a week. So there's a one-day rotation, a possibility of two-day rotation where all students report to school 2 full days. So you have a group coming in on Mondays and Wednesdays and a group coming in on Tuesdays and Thursdays. There may be a recommendation that Fridays are planning days for staff. The extent to which coordination between and amongst grade level or subject area teachers is necessary, that may call for a day such as a Friday where planning might have to take place. There's another schedule option called the AB week, where half of the student population reports to school for 4 full days, and then the second half the next week, and they alternate that way as well. And then depending upon health circumstances, a grade band phase-in is something which could take place depending, where elementaries come in for a period of time and then possibly middle, possibly high. Again, something like that I think would be contingent on the pandemic situation, the status of that situation at the time. In terms of assessments, again, no, not rocket science, but the need for fall diagnostic assessments is important to see where students are at, especially after being out March, April, May, and June, plus the summer. We already are looking at an assessment, an academic assessment called STAR for just this purpose. There are also social emotional survey kinds of assessments that we're going to be looking at. DESA is something that we had mentioned in previous school committee meetings. I learned today that the science MCAS requirement is modified for all current freshmen, sophomores, and juniors. In other words, the state will be accepting a transcript review, and if a child has passed a particular science course, then for freshmen, sophomores, and juniors, current freshmen, sophomores, and juniors, then that means that they would have met the science competency determination. In terms of makeup MCAS, our current grade 10 will be asked to take an MCAS as juniors in the late fall of winter of next school year, again, subject to pandemic conditions. There are some recommendations for career and technical education, creating online learning and modules while school is closed, assessing the status of their inventory, disinfecting all the equipment in the workspaces, and a few more recommendations which I think apply more towards regional vocational schools than to our vocational program. In special education, there's been a lot of tumult since the school closure began. It continues to be a work in progress. The main issues with special education remain the provision of services, whether or not the families are receiving the services remotely, that is to say, maintaining accountability documentation, which is very thick during school closure, and accomplishing all of the work associated with special education in a reasonable amount of time. The other issue that all districts will be faced with is the extent to which compensatory services will be required because of the fact that certain services may not have been able to have been provided. That may not necessarily be an added expense, but it will be certainly a strain on the amount of time necessary to provide services for children. Worst case scenario is that there's litigation with respect to compensatory services. The Maryland plan asserts, and actually this is something that we have been following since the inception of school closure, is that a free, appropriate public education is the touchstone for the entire IEP process for school special education eligibility and services through school closure. And that applies to transitions, including the transition from high school out into the world, the regression or lack of progress of skills, the role of family in teaching and learning, the integration of technology to support learning, parent participation, and the focus on social and emotional well-being. Considerations for remote learning. Down below, we'll briefly discuss committees that have just been formed to look at best practices and what we've learned during school closure. But some of the issues that we're going to be wanting to looking at have to do obviously with instruction, the nature of that instruction, the quality, the extent, not only online technology platforms, but low-cost methods as well in order to ensure that all students have access to the curriculum. Devices, we've handed out over 600 Chromebooks to date. And if remote learning is going to continue throughout the course of next year, those are going to have to remain in place, and who knows whether or not we're going to have to distribute more devices as well. At least the issue of BYOD, bringing your own devices and providing access for students on their phones, is something that we may have to take a look at. I hope that Grant and Brendan didn't just fall back in their chairs when I said that, but I also know that you guys have set up 2 different systems, 2 different platforms for the Chromebooks and for other options and alternatives. Do we have the adequate staffing? Internet access, we have a quote from T-Mobile to create hotspots, and we're going to look into that for next year. Accessibility, again, refers to using native devices such as phones, and the security issue. We sent out a disclaimer early in the year, and we need to maintain security online as much as possible. The plan speaks to summer reinforced learning, and they recommend summer programs either for credit or for credit recovery. The Department of Ed, our Department of Ed, just came up with a notice that there will be a grant application coming out for summer programs and or monies to be used for upcoming vacations next year. So during the winter vacation, spring vacation, or what have you, there may be monies to continue interventions and remediation and the like. The Maryland plan mentions childcare. Well, I don't even know where to begin, but anytime we have young staff members who have 3-year-olds and 5-year-olds at home, and the pandemic turns us in certain directions, allows brick and mortar, doesn't allow brick and mortar, childcare, like underlying medical conditions for staff, is going to remain a very persistent and legitimate concern. Nobody has answers yet, but it is something that is going to affect how things move forward. Samantha, I think you had your...
I'm not exactly sure if you would have the answer to this, but do you know that when plans come out, such as this one, do they survey the staff first to see how comfortable teachers or even their ability to come back in person before they come out with a plan like this?
I certainly can't speak to that. And I would like to think that the working group at the state level is doing so, but anything and everything that we discuss is also going to require working and cooperating with our unions as well. Right. And I'm sure that safety, protection, and an employee's ability to, access their job are going to be top item issues, before anything else. I mean, can we do it? And then let's do it, I think are going to be guiding all those deliberations.
Right. Yeah, I heard somewhere that, this is sort of an obscure number, that 30% of teachers, I don't know if it was in the state or in the US, are considering not coming back. So I'm just because of, the uncertainty of the whole thing.
Right.
So I'm curious if there's a process for that when these plans come out.
Yeah, and I read somewhere 1 in 5 may not be able to answer the bell as well. There was a conversation with the North Shore Superintendent's Roundtable on Friday it was a legislative session, and they were asking whether any legislation, and I'm not necessarily comfortable saying what I'm about to say, but this is what was discussed. There was a conversation as to whether or not there were any bills coming forward for medical early retirement due to the COVID situation. And the point being is that if there are staff members who, for medical reasons, really can't participate, then would there be an early retirement incentive for them, which then gives districts the opportunity to hire somebody who is in a position to do that. The legislators, very appropriately, were very cautious in responding to that, because there are obviously very sensitive issues possibly touching on civil rights when it comes to that kind of arrangement. But I'd be less than truthful if I didn't say that that was something that was discussed in that particular session. So in answer to your question, we really do need to get our finger on the pulse of where our staff members are in terms of coming back. If in a district, if 35% of your people can't come back, then do you go to brick and mortar or do you stay remote? Right. All set? In terms of professional learning, most of the work that was done since March has been local, meaning that the schools themselves know their needs, have people who can work with others, and have done so. But we also need to take a broad umbrella approach and overview to working with our teachers to find out how best to design equitable instruction, whether it's virtual or whether it's a pen and pencil. One of the major considerations is going to be what exactly are our expectations for remote learning going forward. And we do have some committees that are being formed, which are going to hopefully, and they're composed of teachers, and hopefully that they will help us shed some light on what those expectations and the professional needs are going to be. I may have said this once before in this forum, but it would have been nice if we had 2 weeks to have trained the students prior to going to remote learning. And, as far as our teachers are concerned, their proficiency in terms of delivery of remote instruction runs the gamut. So we need to find out where the strengths are, capitalize on them, and identify where the needs are and provide the necessary PD for that. School and community nutrition programs going to be very interesting. If we're in a hybrid situation, that means potentially that half the children are in school, half are not. The ones who are not in school that day, who are eligible for free and reduced lunch, we're still going to have to feed them the way we're doing it now. So does that increase? How much does that increase staffing? How much does that increase the number of hours that our people are going to be working? All stuff that needs to be worked out. Logistics. School safety guidelines, we've spoken about it. Again, this is the first priority. The Department of Ed is going to be sending us a checklist by Monday or Tuesday. And what they are recommending is that we begin collecting PPE as soon as possible, that we plan for a 3-month inventory. The expectation is that children and their families can go out and buy masks in the same way that they buy clothing for the start of school, and that they have their masks. But there's no question that we're going to have masks for the kid that forgets it, or for the kid who has an incident at lunch, or for a kid who might get sick or something along those lines. We're going to have to make sure that we have these things. So we're going to look and see if there's any scratch in our budget so that we can begin now to purchase some of those PPEs. But it's going to include digital thermometers, masks for our nurses, gowns, eye protectors, shoe protection was mentioned this morning, disposal of waste for anything that a COVID-19 victim has come in contact with, hand sanitizers. How many hundreds of thousands of gallons of hand sanitizers are going to be needed just across this particular state? And of course, we'll be working very closely with the health department to determine when it's deemed safe to resume normal educational activities. I have a list here.
Melissa had a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Not really a question, but while we're on the topic, Dr. Safai brought out a good point about preparing for reopening. Is this topic of PPE, can that get referred to BNF at the next meeting as you're discussing closing the budget at the end of the year?
PPE to BNF. PDQ.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
I just think, if there's an expense for all this, let's plan on it now before we do end of the year closing.
Absolutely. The state said they might be able to help to some degree, but it's basically going to fall for the most part on districts. Secondly, the elementary and secondary emergency relief fund, which is the 80% of Title I, that's available, and we'd like to be able to use as much of that as possible. Third, and I'll mention it down below in the superintendent's report, there's a municipal equivalent to the coronavirus relief fund. We're in the process of developing our requests now. The information that has to go in by June the 5th is for FY20, but the entire amount, and for Gloucester, it's $2.6 million. The entire amount has to be, or is eligible, is available through a listing of needs through December of 2020. So we're in the process of developing our spreadsheets. We'll get the FY20 costs, such as the overtime, the purchase of Chromebooks, et cetera. We'll get that into the city by Monday. And then we're also preparing what we are going to need and submitting that to the city as well. In terms of these two grants, the state and I guess the feds are not terribly concerned about overlap. So if you are looking for PPE or Chromebooks or what have you through the municipal side, and then you use the school side for similar, they're not concerned too much about that. If you are supplanting monies that are in your budget, such as for paying for staff, as opposed to supplementing, that they would have a problem with. And last, all of this has to be accounted for. So the invoices, the line items in Munis, et cetera, all the documentation has to be there because anything over $150,000 is going to be audited and the like, which is understandable. So I sort of went through that. Mental health services, again, there's a long laundry list here, but they're dealing with emotional, psychological support, safe rooms, signs throughout the building, signs in the bathrooms, identifying symptoms, how to deal with students or anybody in the building that may come down or we find has a temperature or something along those lines, how we communicate to staff and to students, what to look for, expectations. There's just a lot there that's going to need to be discussed, and you'll hear a recommendation on our calendar, a change. You'll hear about that later on in this meeting as well. Then there's a section on facilities, daily screening, social distancing requirements, how we communicate with our families and staff and students, what happens, how do we send ill persons home, increase in hygiene techniques, additional cleaning requirements, spacing and flow throughout the building, stocking and cleaning of disinfectant supplies, you name it. Probably things I'm sure that none of us have not thought of, but these are the dimensions of what really needs to go into the planning for next year. Last topic is transportation and putting children on buses in a time of COVID-19. So routines involving cleaning, training of staff, policies and procedures for boarding, riding, and disembarking, attrition of bus drivers. There may be bus drivers who say, you know, I don't want to take the risk, or maybe they're medically compromised. PPE equipment for our drivers, routing of buses. If we break up when students go and half go on sometimes and half go on another time, and we find that bus 16's got 10 kids and bus 23's got 50 kids, we may have to change the routing as a result of that on almost a daily basis. We have to anticipate increasing number of parents transporting their children to school, and how that's going to impact drop-off and pickup. Pre and post-trip expansion of the normal cleaning that goes to our buses, especially those hot areas where there's a lot of touching. Contact tracing, not only in transportation, but you know, in the building at large, if a child gets sick, and maybe even protective barriers for our drivers as well. So there's no shortage of things to consider. We will be setting up committees, not just for the remote learning, which we'll transition to in a moment, but we'll be setting up the committee work that needs to be done to begin to address all of these issues. By the end of June, we won't have the answers, but we will have the process in place so that there's a smooth transition, and that the agents that are going to be looking at these issues are in place, so that as soon as possible, a workable plan based upon the guidelines from the Department of Ed will be available for school committee review.
Samantha?
Can you tell us again, what are the different committees that are being formed?
For starters, we have, well, let's transition into that. This is not number 2. And for starters, for an appetizer, we've got teacher committees at the elementary, middle, and high school level that are going to be looking at remote learning and what are the best practices and so on and so forth. And actually, I was going to turn this part over to Greg, and if he's able to amplify that, I would appreciate it.
Sure. Good evening. I can give you a quick overview. We have 3 committees starting tomorrow for their first meetings. It involves 24, I believe 24 teachers and 2 administrators, a K-2 group, a 3-5 group, a middle school group, are all starting tomorrow, and we'll be adding preschool and high school shortly. And really the primary objectives are to plan for student-centered remote or hybrid learning for the fall, and to support teachers in meeting the demands of the different practices. What they're going to take a look at first is they're going to review what's been going on. They'll be collecting feedback from staff, how things have been going, the kinds of things that they have found effective. They'll be collecting feedback from students and families. They will be looking at the schedules and proposing any adjustments that would be helpful. They will be collecting input on professional development that teachers will need, and any resources that we need to gather over the summer. Those will be the immediate things they'll take a look at. This is an advisory group. They're not going to be determining policy, but they will be collecting information from key stakeholders and reviewing the work that has happened over the last 2 months to recommend refinements, best practices, and the kinds of things that we'll need to sharpen and strengthen over the summer and at the beginning of the school year. So I'm looking forward to working with those groups tomorrow, and we'll report out.
Okay.
Alrighty, item number 3, the Federal Coronavirus Relief Fund. I've actually already spoken about that, and Some of the items that we are considering, some of our supplies from our nurses have been used. The Chromebooks, we've had to order about $62,000 worth of Chromebooks. Food service costs we'll be submitting. There are transportation costs associated with the food service. Software upgrades to ensure that our new registration and enrollment can be done remotely and well. And some software upgrades for our increased messaging services as well. So those are some of the items that we'll be submitting to the city for that federal coronavirus relief fund. And then I also, again, had mentioned the elementary and secondary relief fund, and we continue to gather information on that. I've got a fairly lengthy spreadsheet. This is not the time. You've got other things to consider, but we're working on that as well. The due date is July 1st, and we'll have that in as well. Again, to remind, that is 80% of our Title I allocation, so that grant should be for approximately $456,000. I also mentioned earlier, item number 5, that there are some upcoming grants for summer and vacation programs. We also have some of our federal Title IV funds, our Title I funds, which we can apply if we can get people to work with children over the summer, even remotely in a tutorial kind of situation. That's something that we're going to encourage that we do. If I may, one last point, when I was talking about transportation and all that needs to be done, I do want to announce that we do have a new director of transportation, a gentleman from Maine by the name of Adam Mayo. I'll have him come at the next meeting. Just got him under contract. And he's a very experienced fellow. He's the president of the Directors of Transportation for the state of Maine. So he not only has his local perspective, but he has a global experience being, the president of that association as well. So I'll send these bullets out to him after the meeting so he can start to think about them.
Okay. Any, Melissa?
I just have a question going back to about the opening or possible opening in September. I'm wondering if there's been any talk of doing like a virtual tour of O'Malley. Being the family member of a 5th grader, I know there's a lot of anxiety about transitioning from elementary to middle school. And I was just wondering if there was a willingness to do some sort of virtual tour for some of the 5th graders so that they see what they're getting into.
And I would ask if Lynn is available, if she would care to respond to that.
I am, and I can speak to that. So the 6th grade is hard at work currently creating exactly that. We've got a presentation with a combination of videos, photos, examples of what goes on at O'Malley that's should be ready to go probably the end of next week, and will come out to families. If we can, we hope to try and bring kids in to do some summer tours at the end of the summer, but all of that hinges upon whether we're back in buildings and what kind of access we have. So as time marches on, that possibility reduces, but the virtual tour will be out to try to give kids as much of a feel of what 6th grade is as it possibly can be.
Can you share that with the school committee also so we can have that experience?
Sure, I'd be happy to.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Any other questions of the superintendent? No. Do we have a motion to accept the superintendent's report?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Maria, roll call vote?
Ms. Prince,
Yes.
Mayor Taken,
Yes.
Ms. Watson,
Yes.
Ms. Weason,
Yes.
Kathy Clancy,
Yes.
Mr. Favazza,
Yes.
and Chairman Pope.
Yes.
Jonathan?
You're muted.
We'll move on to the next item in the agenda, which is Gloucester High School graduation. Is Mr. Cook going to lead on that?
It all depends. I can discuss the question that was raised about whether or not to hold a virtual drive-in style graduation on June the 21st, followed by a potentially live graduation in early August. Or you can have Mr. Cook explain what's taking place, and then he and I can address the issue that was raised about the validity of holding such a graduation ceremony in June.
James, why don't you paint the picture first?
Sure thing. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Rich, for inviting me to be here today. So I, as you know, the students, student leadership gave a presentation on some of the ideas that they were thinking about, probably more than a month ago or so now. We then took to a process where we solicited additional feedback from students, worked with our health department to reach out to for ideas about what not only graduation, but graduation celebrations could look like. We solicited feedback from parents as well, who provided feedback. And then we brought, I reached out to other schools as well, and what other folks in the area are doing. We brought all those things together, and we made some decisions about really what we're doing is we're doing more celebrating of the class. They'll be getting a couple different graduation celebrations, we hope, out of this. One of the things that took place to help us come up with the idea of the drive-in video event that I'll talk about in a minute is that actually was one of the suggestions that came to us as part of our outreach to the health department. And so Carol McMahon, the COVID planning section chief liaison, assistant emergency management director, had shared that as one of the ideas with us. And of course, as you know, it also came from the students. So that was something that came together. So let me talk about that first. First on June 21st, Sunday, June 21st at 8:30 p.m., we'll turn the O'Malley parking lot into a drive-in theater for graduates and families to watch a graduation celebration of the class of 2020. The video will also be available for families to watch at home. So we're partnering with Studio 1623 to create the video. We'll have another meeting with them on Friday. We'll be reaching out to some of you folks for the speeches that officials give, as well as the speeches that students give. We're going to mimic some of the key elements of our traditional ceremony, and then there are going to be some new elements, including some surprises for that video. And as we celebrate the class of 2020 through that video. So that's the drive-in event that, again, came to us from the students, the student leadership team originally, but also from the outreach and research of Carol McMahon provided that to us. I just spoke with Carol earlier today, just to kind of go one step deeper and talk about, what might some best practices be about the event itself. So we're in regular contact with the city side on that event. The second event, due to an overwhelming interest from students and families to have a live in-person graduation in whatever manner we can, we are joining some other local districts in planning an early August graduation ceremony in whatever form possible. So we'll continue, as we have with all the events, continue to work closely with city officials and to abide by the state and local guidelines for keeping everyone safe. So the details on the Sunday, August 2nd event will be forthcoming, but there was an overwhelming outpouring of interest in doing something, whatever we're able to do live. And so we're excited to do two things for the class of 2020. They've lost so much already, so we're really excited that a couple special things will celebrate this class.
Rich, you want to address the issue around the guidelines from the state?
Yes, a letter was sent out. I think Joel sent a letter to school committee, to the mayor, to the city council, to James. I leave anybody out? Just expressing concern about the guidance that had been provided by the state, specifically that ceremonies held between now and July 18th should be held virtually or in extremely limited other circumstances following safety protocols. Example given, car parades. And Joel, I don't want to speak for you, but I believe it's your position that that we are not experiencing a limited or extraordinary circumstance and therefore should not have a virtual graduation or anything other than an exclusively virtual graduation ceremony prior to July 18th.
Yeah, again, I like the drive-in thing from a personal standpoint, but I'm just trying to make sure that what we're doing is in line with the guidance, and the guidance is pretty clear that, so like this video thing, if everyone contributes videos to 23, Principal Cook and unmuted. If, there you go. If, the video was produced and disseminated virtually, there was one on TV a couple weeks ago. President Obama gave the commencement speech, it was purely virtual, right? That seems to be what the guidance is talking about as allowed prior to July 18th.
Mm-hmm.
If we're going to be pre-July 18th with an outside following safety protocols ceremony, we'd have to fall into the extremely limited other circumstances category. And I'm concerned that the fact that we're also planning a compliant ceremony after July 18th kind of is evidence in and of itself that we're not an extremely limited other circumstance where we can't wait until July 18th to have a graduation. So again, I don't personally take an issue with the concept of this graduation, but I'm concerned that we are not in line with the state guidelines, regarding the pre and post July 18th deadline for when you can go from virtual to outdoor.
So you looked into that today, Rich, right?
Yes, and I asked Naomi, who worked with Commissioner Riley in Lawrence, to send him an email. And Naomi's email says that one of the districts, my district, is planning a virtual graduation in a school parking lot. Students and family members will remain in their cars. There will be a video playing similar to a drive-in theater of a graduation celebration containing pictures of the students and speeches. The video will be available online for families to watch at home. There will be no diplomas distributed and all participants will remain in their cars. Please let me know if this is consistent with DESE guidelines on graduation ceremonies prior to July 18th. One school committee member is claiming that this violates your advisory, but I think we are fine. Thank you, Naomi. The response from the commissioner at 9:39 on May 27th seems fine, but it has to be blessed by the local board of health or health officer. That's where enforcement takes place.
This is under the guidance of the city health already, so it sounds like we preemptively have that blessing, correct?
Correct. That is correct. He also stated this morning that the sending out the guidance when they did seemed to cause more confusion than help. That line about extremely limited other circumstances, I believe, refers to something like a car parade, which is why in parentheses it says example given, car parades. That is an extremely limited other circumstance. In any case,
that's a following safety protocols, parenthetical, e.g. car parade.
Yeah.
E.g. is example given, right?
Right, but bottom line, it's in the local Board of Health's hands. They're the ones who recommended it. It coincided, as James said, with what the students themselves want. And we continue as recently as today to speak with the health department and COVID management. And we will continue to ensure that the details are consistent with Board of Health expectations.
Thanks. If I can just hop back in, my overarching concern here, and this is, I'm happy that we've gone through and gotten this guidance, is that I don't want this district to be seen as, flouting any rules. I mean, we just talked earlier about how we may need to prepare for incoming lawsuits as a result of us following protocol and being able to deliver certain special education services, right? And so I would want to make sure that we're being consistent across the board. And that's, again,
Right.
I don't
Of
appreciate
course.
my letter claiming that I was claiming it violated. I was simply asking if it violated,
Right.
again, because I don't want us in trouble, especially for something that, although is, awesome, isn't a necessity.
There's a presumption in your argument that we would do otherwise than follow the expectations by both the Department of Ed and the Health Department, and at no time were we even considering doing something that would be quote out of bounds.
Well, yeah, but I mean, in both your email and tonight, even you've misquoted or misstated your understanding of the guidance. Your highlighted red email was incorrect, and tonight.
Okay,
just said what the
Yeah, I don't want to
our brain
indulge
was
in any
referring to.
anti-logia at this point.
I don't-
Bottom line.
No, but again, I'm just suggesting it was complicated, and you've clearly been confused tonight and in an email.
Jonathan, can we have a point of order here? This
Yes,
is getting out
absolutely.
too much. Thank you.
This is not what we need to be doing.
Hold on,
right now.
don't jump all over me. He's making assertions about my behavior, and I'm just simply setting the record straight. That's not fair.
We're going to move on to the next item,
Speaking,
which is the superintendent search. And at this point, I'm going to open up oral communications to participants who would like to weigh in on the superintendent search. So if you'd like to, all the regular order of protocols for oral communications apply. If you would like to be recognized, please raise your hand or dial *9 if you're coming in by phone, and I will recognize you. When you're recognized, please state your name and address, and then proceed to make your statement. And Cynthia, you are first up.
Thank you, Jonathan. This is Cynthia Carney, president of the Gloucester Teachers Association and fifth grade teacher at Veterans Memorial School. I have two questions. One question first, if I could. I just need to verify the open meeting laws and your ability to change the agenda. I'm not sure if that's allowable in an open meeting law. I just wanted to ask if you could clarify that for me.
Okay,
And
we do it all the time. If it's with the without objection from the committee, we can change the agenda.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that for me. Also, and then what I wanted to state about the superintendent search was I did see all the 5 interviews. I wanted to thank the search committee and the school committee for doing such a great job on vetting 21 applicants down to 5 who seemed very, very qualified. I did hear a lot of comments from the candidates about, from some of the candidates about social justice, equity and diversity, which I think is very important to our district. And I just wanted to state that I hope that the final candidate has experience relative to the unique needs of our district. And I am sure that you guys will take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. Is there anybody else who would like to weigh in? I'm not seeing anybody. Okay. Well, then I'm going to close the public input portion of this discussion. And I will start by reminding everybody that, as I said at the beginning of the meeting, that Nan Murphy has withdrawn her application because she has accepted a position as an assistant superintendent in another district. Melissa?
I just wanted to ask if we can recognize those that wrote in letters in support of individual candidates as part of the oral communications, because we did receive many. Well,
Yes.
not many, but
Okay.
enough to mention.
We can do that. I have my list. I've been transferring them out to Maria for the record. And if any of you have received letters that I don't mention, please do. I'm not going to read them all, but we have a letter from our SPED director, Patty Wegman, who also served on the search committee, and she was recommending Nan Murphy. We have a letter from Rachel Rex, the vice president of the GTA and also a department head at the Gloucester High School. And she was was advocating for Ms. Gallivan and Mr. Koska. Not Mrs. Koska, excuse me. Lynn Beatty authored a letter which was signed by all of the principals in the district, and they were advocating for Nan Murphy. Janet Donovan, who was on the search committee and is a math coach in the elementary schools, was advocating for Nan Murphy. Bo Abrams, who was also on the search committee, wrote in and advocated for Murphy, Kuska, and Gallivan. Melissa Desmond wrote, who was, I believe, on the search committee, and she was advocating for Kuska and Murphy. Eric Morris, who was on the search committee, was advocating for Kuska and Lasco. Let's see, Maggie Rosa, who was on the search committee, was advocating for Loomis and Lasco. And that's the extent of the letters that I received. Did anybody else get a letter that I didn't mention? I think most of these letters were sent to everybody.
Jonathan, did we address Jim Destino, chair of the search committee's letter? I haven't gotten a response.
Well, I thought he did. I thought Laura responded, but Mr. Destino wrote a letter basically saying that he thought that the search committee should not be advocating, that they should be remaining neutral. Is that more or less the position that he took? Melissa? You still have your hand up.
Well, no, the letter stated that you only wanted positive remarks from the committee. So how are we going to know what they really felt if you're only asking for positive remarks? I can't make a decision tonight unless I hear the truth about everyone. Just what you see in an interview wasn't enough because it's virtual.
Okay, well, let's be clear what we're doing tonight. And now that we only have 4 candidates, is that we are reducing from 4 to 3 or possibly 2. When I stated that you should point out people's attributes as opposed to pointing out other people's negative sides, I was doing that basically because everything is public, and we are potentially liable for making a decision based on prejudice of any sort. So it was just a cautionary thing from me. If you want to express your opinion about a particular candidate, that is your right.
Well, no, it's, first of all, the executive minutes is not going to be released until after, correct?
No, the executive minutes are not going to be released.
At all, even after when we pick a superintendent?
They can be after we protect the
So
superintendent.
what's the difference of a lawsuit at now and then after?
The reason they meet in executive session is to protect the
I understand. I've been on the city
identity
council.
of
I
the
understand executive
applicants.
committee, but I want to make sure that we get a vote. All right, you had 18 or 20 people on your search committee. Okay, a few were sending us messages of how they feel or what they don't feel. So, and they gave us a candidates of 5. And so they're all now pushing or sending emails to us of the ones they want. So, and then we had the interviews with them, and we all, arbitrated among each other of like, okay, this one, that one after each interview, or not arbitrated, but saying the goods, the pros and the cons. And so after the person who we were interviewed left the discussion. So I'm trying to get everyone's feel. Like, I'm sorry, I've never been involved when the superintendent. I've been involved in my chief of police and everything else, and ordinance and school committee. Maybe we do it differently. I just want to make sure that I'm hearing everything. So when I do make that decision, the last 3, and we re-interview these people, we know what we're going to ask. That's all.
Melissa?
I just want to go back a little bit and just talk about, we decided on how we were going to do this process. And one of the things that was really important to the committee as a whole was to get the community involved in a way that infiltrated trust and confidence in our process. And by doing that, we selected the screening committee, knowing that the school committee voted to stay out of that process and let them bring 5 qualified candidates to us after vetting them. I know we're all feeling frustrated. I'm sure we can all raise our hands to some extent about not knowing the extent of those conversations that were held in the search committee. But we have to have faith and confidence in the process that we chose to do, knowing that everyone who came before us is qualified. So there's really nothing ugly to look for. We just have to believe and know that we have those 5 candidates. Now, there was several people on that search committee, and you're not going to get them all to agree. This is like me chairing the tech school committee with 20 members. There's a lot of opinions in that group, and obviously a lot of favorites, but the group as a whole put 5 candidates forward, and we have to trust, because we're not getting the information we hope to get. We have to trust that the candidates are good. There's nothing to look for other than the questioning that we do. We already gave them 1 line of question. We can get more particular in the next line of question. And then we can check into, what do you call them? What's the word when the references, and things like that. So it is going to get a little more into each candidate as we go forward. I understand what Safathi is saying. It's very frustrated, but this is the process we chose for a reason. And I know the search committee was very grateful for this process and have said nothing but good things about the fact that the school committee was not involved in bringing those 5 candidates forward. So they felt it was a really good process. So I guess we just have to trust in that as a committee and know that we're doing the right thing, even though it feels a little awkward sometimes.
Okay, before we open up for discussion, I'd like to just say, reiterate something that Melissa just said. Every one of these candidates is qualified, and every one of them has strengths. What we need to do and what is our task is not necessarily to figure out who's the best person or the best thing. We need to find the best match, the best person that's going to fit in with the team that we have in place now, who's going to work best with them and complement their skills and abilities, and so that we have a well-rounded team. So before I open it up for discussion, Dorothy, do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, I don't.
No, you don't. Okay. All right. So the task before us is to narrow this field down so that we can then proceed to do site visits and further interviews. And we'll talk about the process a little bit after we have the discussion about the candidates. So there's a couple of ways to go about this. One would be to put forth a slate. I would, if we do that, I would be looking for a consensus on the committee that this is the slate, these are the people that we want to go forward with. The other way would be to look at each one individually and vote them up or down. So I'm going to open it up for discussion about how how you'd like to proceed. Okay. Melissa.
I could proceed either way, to be honest with you. I think both can work. I think what I'd like to see is if we can come to a decision as a group as to how many of the 4 we're going to put forward. Sometimes that helps. I mean, can we agree that 2 is enough, or do we think we need 3? I mean, I think there's a lot to be said in numbers and trying to figure that out. I mean, it's essentially we're only eliminating 1. But that's a thought. And then, like I said, I can do either way. I kind of like the individual up or down because it forces us to talk about the candidate a little bit and why. And that's what we're elected to do when we hire a superintendent, is to do our due diligence. So I like someone to be out of conversation and persuasion. So I like the conversation as opposed to just putting a slate and then trying to figure out if it's the right slate. So whatever the will of the committee is, but I'd like to see if we can get down to 2 candidates going forward rather than 3 and see if that's reasonable before we start.
Laura?
I think that's a great question, and I wanted to ask for Dorothy's guidance on that, given that last time around you already had warned us that someone was being considered for other jobs. Now we've already had someone drop out. Is it, I mean, ideally, I agree, Melissa, I'd like to have 2 candidates, but is it safe at this point to have 2 candidates moving forward since there are so many searches going on at the moment?
So the downside of 2, if you can't move very quickly, is that if one of those 2 drops out, accepts another position, then you have the last man standing. And you would need to decide, is that person the person you want, or do you need to go back out? So you're less likely to have that happen if you have 3 people that you're confident in would be qualified to be the next person should they be chosen. Laura, does that answer your question?
Yes, I mean, that's what I was wondering.
Yeah, at this point, don't pick someone you're not confident in just to match a number.
Okay. Anybody else want to weigh in on basically the how to proceed? Laura?
Well, I was just going to say, I appreciate what Melissa was saying about conversation. I'm a little uncomfortable. I mean, this, ideally one of these people that we're discussing is going to be the person we hire. So therefore having our open comments, whether critical or not, it's a fine line for me. I would love to hear the opinions of everyone on the committee. I'm also aware that this is all public and will be visible to the person we hire. So that's tricky as we're building relationships, right?
Let me just ask a general question to everybody, and you can just kind of give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Is everybody in their own mind got 3 candidates that they'd like to see forward? Kathy says no. 2. Laura says 2. Joel says 2. Melissa said 5, but now she's down to 2. Samantha, any idea how you want 2? You want to go to 2?
2 candidates? I want 3.
You want 3.
Absolutely. 1 drops out, you have 2. I mean, you know what? If the search, look at how many people you got in the search to begin with. If someone wants to go someplace else when they weren't meant to be to serve here, were they? That's how I look at things.
Okay, all right. I hear you. I hear what we're saying. I'm just trying to get to where we need to be. Samantha.
So just to be clear, before we got this news, I was comfortable moving to 3. So, I think this shifts a lot of our process. And I mean, I can only speak to myself, but I spent a lot of time this weekend working through this. So now I'm just trying to process it. And I know I'm comfortable with 2. I would have been comfortable with 3. So that's just.
Well, I think the idea that if there's just 2 people, the likelihood that somebody's going to drop out is decreased by a little bit. If you're one of 3, it's probably more likely. I don't know what people's situations are. We know that all of these people have applied for other jobs. They're actively in the job market, and which is not to say that they don't want to come to Gloucester, or they might hold out to come to Gloucester. But if somebody's standing there offering them a job tomorrow, that's the way it's going to go. So let's, if we could just get a sense of our time frame, Dorothy, how much difference in the time frame to the finish is 2 or 3? Could you?
My hope is that after you decide tonight whether you have 2 or 3, or even decide to stick with 4, that you could put your foot to the gas and get it all done next week. That would mean a lot of site visits happening next week in both directions, and the interviews again next week. But if people have the time, I think it can be done.
Okay. Melissa, you have your hand up?
Yeah, so I know I mimic what Sam says. There would have been 3 earlier, but to me now there's 2. So that kind of just shows you where I'm at in my head a little bit. But I'm not so concerned of having someone there if someone drops out. I mean, we're putting 2 candidates forward. We know they're all qualified. I've learned in life, just through my experiences, whatever happens, it was meant to be. It was meant to be why we're going to 2 tonight. I mean, why we don't have Dan before us tonight. I'm okay sticking with 2 if that's the will of the committee. I mean, we can do 3, but then that kind of looks odd to me that only 1 got removed. So I think 2 is a better number. I know there's 2 that I'm confident in, but I also want to hear the conversation with everybody else to see if we're all thinking the same too. Maybe we are, maybe we're not, and we go to be. I don't know. So I think maybe we should start talking about our positions, and that might narrow the number.
Joel.
I think another way to look at this, as far as the competitiveness of our district versus other districts that would be interested in these candidates, as I said, theoretically, if we put 2 forward, we should be at the point where we'd say, if it's either of them, we're in good shape, and maybe we'll find one that, is a little better fit for the district than the other, but we certainly are putting 2 forward, and one of them we wouldn't want. And with, Nan dropping out, it may have been because, and certainly I suggested it, but, maybe had we on Friday, narrowed down sooner, she may have saw, oh, Gloucester's really interested in me, I want to hold off on making a decision, sort of thing, right? The same thing tonight, the 4 that are left, if we grab 2, and those 2 have other opportunities, they may say, well, Gloucester seems really interested in me. They pick me and only one other person. I want to see what comes out of Gloucester before I, finalize somewhere else.
I think that's a good point. I would be in favor of going to 2. Like I say, if we go to 2, the 2 that I would pick, I have complete confidence that either one of them can do the job.
And that's the whole idea. You just read off some letters of people on your committee who put the 5 forward. Out of all of them, there's not even a consensus of 2 or 3. Second of all, we couldn't even come to consensus of last school committee meeting. And when are these interviews going to be with our police, our DPW? When are they going to talk to them? When you pick the two or when you pick the one? Because I asked during the school committee when we're face to face, when are they going to be able to talk to staff that they interact with?
The process will be whoever we pick tonight will have an interview with Gloucester. They will set up an interview with the chief of police and the DPW and perhaps the Gloucester Education Foundation and maybe some of the principals. And they will meet. And then we will go, some of us, not all of us, will do the same thing with their district. We'll go and interview their principals and co-workers and superintendents. And and as Dorothy said, we're going to try to do that all next week. So that by the end of next week, we're in a position to make a decision. And that's our goal. That's our timeline. Obviously, it's going to be a lot easier to do with 2 than 4. That would be when that happens. So we'd have a site visit here, a site visit at their site, and then we would have another interview. And in that final interview, we can ask more directed questions that are more particular to their strengths and weaknesses.
That's fair enough. And all the interviews were now for public record, completely, correct?
All of our interviews, yes. Yeah. None of the search committee's interviews are.
No. Okay.
Great. So, Samantha, are you you're just waving your arms around? Okay. Anybody else want to weigh in that? I'd be happy to go to 2 at this point. Do you want to, and just to open the conversation, it would be, I would put forward Mr. Loomis and Ms. Kuska as the 2. Laura?
So I'll just go second.
Yeah.
So mine were Dr. Kuska and Ben Loomis.
Samantha?
Mine were also Ben Loomis and Dr. Kuska.
Melissa?
I'm so excited to hear this because those are my 2 too. So this is getting easier. Great candidates, both of them.
All right. Kathy, Joel, Safafia? Joel? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Same 2.
The same 2. Okay.
Same with me, same 2.
Melissa?
I wanted to make a motion to move this along.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to move forward.
Well, I'm glad you don't like my
sorry.
opinion. That's okay. But I did like the same 2, and I did like the I forget the gentleman's name, the 3rd one from Louisiana, wherever he was, to give a chance, but you people will not. But those 2 are very, very good. Very good. So, but just see, and this is how the whole process is. You keep pushing things along, people. This is talking about a superintendent who's going to deal with your schools, your children, the COVID that's coming in. We need, you know what? There's no rush. There really isn't. There really isn't a rush. Thank you.
I just want to apologize, Mayor. I don't see you on my screen, so I only have 4 members in front of me, so I apologize for trying to.
That's okay, but the chair was calling the name, so out of respect, because you always say jump in. I didn't want to jump in, so I'm waiting my turn because the rest didn't say.
I get it.
Yeah.
I just wanted to apologize. That's all. Like I said, I'm sorry. It's my fault.
That's fine. That's fine. I'll just leave myself unmuted. You can hear all my comments.
Melissa, you want to proceed?
I just want, that way we can get into discussion. So I'm going to make a motion that we put forward as the final superintendent candidates to be Dr. Susan Kuska and Ben Loomis.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. Discussion. Samantha, you had your hand up.
I just wanted to, I know a couple people have made comments about us not deciding on Friday, and I do feel like it's just important to just point out, at least for me, how important that time was to go through the interviews again. It became much clearer to me. And I also had a few residents reach out and say that they were so happy that they got a chance to look at the interviews once they were posted publicly online. So as far as the process is concerned, I think that was really the only fair and ethical way to sort of move forward. And although we feel like maybe we lost a good candidate in the process, I don't think there was a better way forward.
Okay, we have a motion and a second before us. Is there any discussion? Kathy.
I'm excited about the two candidates that have been put forth in the motion, but I also want to acknowledge that this pool of candidates that was put forth by the search committee was very impressive. I just think it says a lot about our district and how far we've come, that we are an attractive district for a lot of people of really high caliber to want to apply and want to be part of us. So I thank them all for submitting their interest. It means a lot to me personally.
Okay, Melissa.
I echo what Kathy said. I mean, 5 great candidates, and that was, to me, unexpected. I didn't expect to get 5. I thought we were going to get 3, but 5 was great. But I just wanted to say, we all look through different lenses of, the candidates that we want. And it's funny how, even though we all have different opinions, we pretty much all agreed tonight for the final 2. So to me, that's a good sign. Jonathan, I appreciate your leadership through this when you talk about, complementing what Gloucester has and how do we find that right person, because that helped me in my decision-making after I watched all the interviews 2 or 3 times and heard completely different conversations than the first time. So it's been a good process, and I feel confident that we do have a superintendent coming, and look forward to that. And thank the search committee very much for their efforts and their time and their consideration.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? Okay. I would just like to say this, reiterate our gratitude to the search committee. I think they did an outstanding job. I think that the candidates that they put forward were every one of them was qualified and could have been a good superintendent here in Gloucester. And but we have to pick one, and we have to get moving down the road on that. So if nobody else has any further comments or discussion, I'm going to call for a vote. Maria?
Ms. Prince?
Yes.
Mayor Taken?
Yes.
Ms. Watson?
Yes.
Ms. Wiesen?
Yes.
Kathy Clancy?
Yes.
Mr. Favazza?
Yes.
And Chairman Pope?
Yes, it passes unanimously. So congratulations to our 2 final candidates, and thank you sincerely to the 2 candidates that, as well as the Nan Murphy who dropped out. They were all good candidates, and we learned a lot by talking to you all, and we appreciate it. We will move on to the next order of business, which is committee reports.
Jonathan?
Kathy?
Jonathan?
Yes. Yes, Laura.
You're muted. Someone tell us you're muted.
I want to thank Dorothy also just for sticking with us and continuing to advise us through this process. I find her comments very helpful. So I want to thank Dorothy. We're not done yet, but just want to thank you.
So can I comment? You're not done yet. So how will we proceed for the next step? Obviously, I'll be in touch with all the candidates to let them know their status, but we need to get the visits arranged. So can you just give me some idea how that process will happen?
I'm going to suggest that that you, Melissa, and I work together to set up the site visits and schedule the final interviews. That's going to require a lot of work by you and a little bit of work by Melissa and I. just to,
That's why I'm here.
okay. So is that agreeable and if you want to weigh in on who you would like to see either the candidates meet with here in Gloucester and or who you would like us to meet with in their district, contact Melissa or I, and we will make sure that that happens. Is that agreeable? I don't see any. Melissa?
I just want to say, I think it would be good if we do a little bit of outreach, just do this brief thing while we're all here, to find out the availability of all the members, because I would almost guess that as many as possible want to be a part of as many meetings as they can. So maybe I'll reach out or you'll reach out real quick to find out what the schedules are next week for our school committee members, and we'll go from there. Because where it's on Zoom, it's easy for everyone to just zoom in.
I will start with that, and I will send something out right after this meeting where you can just let me know what your schedules are for next week, and we'll try to work around access for the most people. Kathy?
Yeah, I just want to also make sure that the time demands of the principals, that we reach out to them to find out when a good time for them to have their kind of administrators discussion with the candidates as the candidates visiting here, so that, that gets scheduled so they can all participate.
That is obviously has to be done. And that's why we need Melissa and I and Dorothy all kind of making calls and finding out what people's schedules are. That's what the bulk of this work is going to be, finding what all of your schedules are, finding out what the schedules of the police chief and the fire chief and the head of DPW and the mayor, when they can all meet with these people. So it's really just a lot of legwork that's going to have to be done. While we're talking about schedule, though, I'll remind people that next Tuesday at 5 o'clock, we are, BNF will be presenting the budget to the City Council BNF, as well as the administration. So that is coming up. So that's on that as of right now, that's the only thing I know of. And Melissa, did you schedule any meetings with the nurses next week?
Yeah, we got to talk about that. So there's a couple of conversations to have.
Okay, all right. All right, are we ready to move on to BNF report? Good. Kathy?
Okay. The Building and Finance Subcommittee met last Wednesday, and we got a report from the Chief Financial Officer, Gary Frisch, that, fiscal 2020 expenses are still running under budget, and there are plans for prepay for preschool, out-of-district tuition, which is what we do every year, and other end-of-year expenses to provide for financially. We went over some ideas on the budget, and I would think that we should have Rich and Gary present those discussions, or do you think it was just kind of too preliminary to have those thoughts? I think it's probably helpful to have it at this level.
Obviously, the budget is not going to be what we passed back in March. And the administration has been looking at how to, what their recommendation would be to us for the budget that has been put forward by the city. And if you'd like to, just Gary or Richard, just like to weigh in briefly on that, that's an opportunity to do that. I think it's good for us to start thinking about where we're going to be, particularly when we're going to be presenting to the City Council BNF next week. And what we have in front of us is a budget that's substantially above what the city is going to be able to do for us.
If I can start, and Gary, if you want to chime in afterwards, please do. I'll start with the second point first. We have our presentation to the Budget and Finance Subcommittee before the City Council next Tuesday. I don't know exactly what time, somewhere around 6 o'clock or 5, I'm not sure. But the point that we need to make is that the school committee voted a budget back in early March, which is indicative of what we believe to be the actual needs of the district in order to help it move forward. And as Mr. Pope has said, there's also the realization that the mayor has submitted her budget, that there's a certain figure that of a budget increase. I believe it's $1.25 million for next year, and that both the school committee and the district understand that we have a financial responsibility to come in at that particular budget level, and that we will do so. When we looked in the building and finance, we had already prioritized the options into options A, B, and C, and these are all additional requests. This is a very difficult time in terms of optics to be asking for additional requests, but the needs of the district are great. And the one thing that we were able to add after talking with principals and really trying to work this through is to go with option A, and also to include the 0.5 at Beaman, 0.5 at O'Malley English language learner teacher. There are lots of needs. Some needs are closer to regulations and to the amount of services and compliance that are necessary, and the English language learner position falls into that category. So that's where we are. The 1.25 enables us to, at least at the present, to present a budget which at this point, also subject to change at the discretion of the school committee, to go with our initial option A. I haven't got it committed to memory, and to add the English language learner position that would be 0.5 at Beaman and O'Malley.
Okay, this is just for information. We are going to have a number of very difficult conversations, I'm sure, about money in the next 6 months. We don't even know at this point what they're going to be, but tonight's not the night to try to figure it out. Okay, so Kathy, you want to continue?
Sure. Okay, we discussed out-of-district transportation. As everybody knows, we've been continuing to pay certain people, including out-of-district transportation, but Gary and Kathy Verger were able to come to agreements on a reduced percent to our out-of-district transportation companies to basically reflect things, their expenses like insurance, some of their labor costs, and other things. So I think we feel comfortable that we've arrived at a kind of a fair and in the spirit of what the state is expecting us to do in terms of those, that kind of expense. We went over the DPW open tickets, which did not take any time at all because there were only 10. So I think that's probably a reflection that we're not in school, but second, that the DPW has continued to work through those open tickets and take care of those items that were on there. Part of our DPW discussion also was an update from Lynn Beatty on the work that has been done at O'Malley, and I did ask Gary to show some pictures so that people can get a visual of what's happening on the inside of the school. There's a lot of really terrific changes that hopefully the students will get to see in September. And so I just thought he would take a couple minutes just to kind of quickly go through those pictures so everybody can get a sense to what improvements have been made.
Okay. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. We have about 6 pictures. And the first one is the remodeling of the bathrooms at O'Malley. You can see there's new partitions and new flooring, and as well as a new hand dryer, automatic hand dryer. We'll see that in another picture. So they did a really good job. on the bathrooms. And then also, there was a lot of painting that needed to be done in the classrooms, and they really spruced it up by adding colors and making a refresh for the classroom. So the students will be excited. Here's that hand dryer I talked about. This is a real, more of the better brand, Dyson. You put your hands down there, in there. I'm not sure this is COVID-19 acceptable. We'll have to get a new, the health department to weigh in. But this was already planned prior to COVID-19. There was some bare cement walls in O'Malley, and they painted over that, as well as the wood on the bottom was not painted, and they painted that gray, as you can see. So a real nice finish to the hallways. Here they've added benches in the hallways, and this is a nice place for students to mingle, congregate, and collaborate about school. So also they contracted with Seaside Graphics to paint this mural, and really makes it much more attractive than a blank painted wall. So really nice addition. And they finished with the tile that was bare. Here's another classroom that is painted, really brighten up the classroom. So kudos to the DPW and to Mike Hale for leading this remodeling initiative at O'Malley.
Thank you, Gary. And I know Lynn is on the call. I don't know, Lynn, if you want to chime in at all, but one of the things that the DPW made very clear is that these changes happened at O'Malley, both the interior and the exterior, is because Lynn, quote unquote, had her ducks in a row and really was well organized so that they could execute the items that she was requesting. Having this entire list help them kind of, gather resources all together and get things done efficiently and effectively. So Lynn, I don't know if you want to say anything, but I'm kind of excited for your school.
Sure. I really want to give a huge thank you to Mike Hale and the DPW guys and the contractors that they brought in. They did amazing work really quickly. The pictures that Gary showed are only really about half of what was done. Those maroon painted walls were all over the building, so all of the unfinished concrete is repaired. They put new clocks into the buildings because all of our clocks were basically covered with a piece of paper because they were an old clock system that no longer functioned. And there's another mural in addition to the one that was shown, and there were 8 bathrooms redone altogether, the flooring and partitions. So it has made a huge difference in the appearance. I was in and did a walkthrough, and it's beautiful. And they also did a ton of work outside, repaving the back road, regrading the parking lot in the back, a new fence around the back toward the marsh, planting of new trees, a lot of concrete repair. The walkway slope up to the front door is redone. So it was great to have them take advantage of this time that they were able to do that. And I also Jeff Destino was really helpful in terms of helping me build this list of things that we wanted to get done. And Mike and the crew's just been amazing. So.
Thank you, Lynn. So on the other items, people can read through the packet and the CFO report for things like food service debt and revolving funds. There was nothing out of the ordinary. The one item, I believe it's under action as well, was the spring coaches and the revenue for athletics for the spring season. So we'll wait till action for that, Jonathan?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay. We're almost there, though.
Okay.
Okay, moving on into action. And the first item is the 2020-2021 school calendar. The September 14th is still up in the air. That has not been declared, but there is a proposal before that the administration has brought forward about changing the professional development day that normally happens on election day to happen before school starts. And I don't know, Greg, do you want to weigh in on this, or Rich? I don't know.
I'd be happy to.
Thanks.
Thank you. The draft, and I did send that around today. Apologize for the short notice, but I needed to make sure that we had gathered information and communicated with the GTA about the calendar change. This was actually something that was proposed by a group of teachers in one of the subcommittees recently, was that with the understanding that there would be so much that has been happening in the spring, and so much to learn from and learn for the start of the new year, as well as potentially really significantly different logistics, that we needed some time before the school year started. Frankly, we could use about 5 days, but at least we had one that was a relatively easy move, which is November 3rd. Would have been a day when students did not have school anyway. And moving that to August 31st, which is the Monday, that would become the staff professional development day. Everything else that has been on the prior calendars, including the student start day, which would remain September 2nd, Wednesday. It doesn't change the end date either, because that election day had been a day off for students. And the only other changes to the calendar are a few adjustments to the upper left-hand side where the open houses are listed. And those were just in consultation with the principals. They needed to adjust a few times. So really only significant change is moving November 3rd to August 31st with no impact on student start or end date.
Okay. So basically what we need here is a motion to change the professional development day of November 3rd to August 31st. And I so moved. Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Is there any discussion? Melissa?
So I'm looking at the calendar and I see September 22nd in yellow. That's not the conversation we're having tonight, right? Because it wasn't the holiday issue supposed to be on the 21st, September 21st?
If I could answer that one.
Sure.
The yellow is an error, that highlight.
Okay.
And the issue that is on the agenda is actually regarding the 14th, which at some point was suggested that would be made a legal holiday, and that has not happened yet at the state level. So, that may still come, but not yet.
Thank you. I thought it was the 21st, not the 14th. It was a holiday, so I was going to have an issue there.
Okay.
And I'll remove the yellow highlighting.
Thank you.
So all we have here is changing a professional development day and not, not changing any classroom days for students. So that's all we're talking about right now. Okay. So we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Maria, could we have a roll call vote?
Ms. Prince?
Yes.
Mayor Taken?
Yes.
Ms. Watson?
Yes.
Ms. Weason?
Yes.
Kathy Clancy?
Yes.
Mr. Favazza?
Yes.
And Chairman Pope?
Yes. Okay, it passes unanimously. We'll move on to our next action item, which is the second reading of the social media policy for the Gloucester School Committee. And I would start by just asking for a motion to waive the actual reading so that we can just go into discussion.
So moved.
Second? Anybody?
Second.
Okay. Is there any discussion about waiving the reading, the actual reading? We're not going to talk about it, just not going to make Laura read it. Okay. Maria, could we have a roll call vote?
Ms. Prince,
Yes.
Mayor Taken,
Yes.
Ms. Watson,
Yes.
Ms. Weason,
Yes.
Kathy Clancy,
Yes.
Mr. Favazza,
Yes.
Chairman Pope.
Yes. Okay. Now we are having the second reading. If we pass this, it will become policy for the schools and the school committee. So do we have a motion? We will start with a motion and then we'll go into discussion or amendments. Anybody want to make a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All right. We have a motion and a second. We're now discussing the social media policy for the Gloucester School Committee. The motion is to accept this as a policy. Is there any discussion? Kathy?
Yes, I'm just looking through. I'm trying to find out where it is, but I know that it's more of a word than it's not substantive, but it refers to the poster. And I think probably the better term would be administrators for the actual Facebook page. I think that's what people are, as administrators, if they're allowed to change and make things on the site. So I would just want that word different, because a poster is a poster that's on the wall.
So Laura, this is your policy.
Yes.
This is, do you accept that amendment?
I accept that amendment. Kathy, it's page 53 in the packet, just so, but I see where you're talking. It's in 2. It's in 2. The school committee will appoint 2 committee members to be designated posters, so we can make that designated administrators.
Thank you.
Joel?
So just a question, there were obviously edits made between the first reading and the second reading. I know we waived the reading of it this time around. Do we have to do anything to make sure those edits are included, that it's clear it's not the as presented last time, it's as presented tonight?
Well, you're right. What should have happened is the motion should have been, because Laura listened to the discussion on the first reading and made some edits, but it should have been noted that it had been edited. So maybe we want to go back to the motion and basically say that it should be presented as amended after the first reading.
So moved. Is that
Yeah.
what we're looking for?
Yes, that's what we're looking for.
I mean, I can second it. I just don't agree with having to do that, but that's okay.
Okay.
Doesn't matter.
Well, it just should be noted that it's been changed since the first reading.
Exactly.
And those, Laura asked me about, how, what to do with that. And I said, well, you should make the amendments as you heard it from the committee. But I neglected to note it that it had been amended. So, Laura?
I have a version with track changes. If anyone would, I did a version in Google Docs that shows track changes, if that's of interest, but that doesn't feel like it goes in our packet in that form.
Okay.
So that's available.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on the social media policy of the school committee?
I have a question.
Okay.
So who's going to be the administrators?
Well, as it says in the policy, they're going to be appointed by the school committee.
Right. And so, well, because not everyone has it in front of them. So they're going to be responsible for all the updates all the time, everything that's going on and all the questions and things that people post on there?
Laura?
So, so it's going to be an informational sort of outgoing site, but we're going to not have comments or questions. Anyone who writes directly to the page is going to receive an automatic response telling them how to get in touch with the school committee, either via email or telephone, or how to speak during oral communications at a meeting. And we're going to not have comments on our posts. So this is really purely an informational page to get information out to the public.
So no, I'm not talking about us, the school committee, but I'm saying no one can put comments on the post. So whatever information, so I'm looking because you have to be careful now, because like I said, and I just got a text from someone. So I have a mayor's post and I have my own personal post. The mayor's post, I will put down all the updated things that are happening in the community, the COVID. But underneath that, people can post. Are you going to allow people to post?
No, we're going to have comments turned off.
Okay, so the only thing it's going to be is look at our beautiful Facebook page. You're going to just see informational things. And if it's going to be links there if they need to ask questions, or it's going to be something that, if you can't post, then how do you know someone wants to ask a question?
They can write to us and receive the information, the email back saying, here's how you ask a question. You write to the school committee, or you stand up at a school committee meeting and ask a question. People can share the posts if they want to share the information, but they're not gonna, we don't want this to be a back and forth thing. For open meeting law purposes, we can't have sort of a back and forth in this format. So this is purely to make sure there's another venue for information coming from the school committee and notifications for meetings and stuff like that. If people have a question that they want to ask us, it's a great opportunity for them to.
You have to be careful now, because I just learned about public pages. And because of public pages, sometimes I just had to go through the Attorney General's office because I had to delete nasty things. And everyone has a freedom of speech. So you have to be careful what you're posting. And if people can't post on it, so I really would ask our city, your solicitor, to really look at what we're going to do, because it just happened to me, or else I would have told you earlier or whatever, but I had to go through the Attorney General's office because I had to stop someone because they were actually threatening other people. But because everyone has their constitutional rights, I had to go through the Attorney General's to make sure, and the ethics commissions and everything else. So you are going to have because we have tons of pages in Gloucester. We have the Coast Guard, we have the Harbor Master ones, we have the beaches ones, we have the Board of Health, the Police Department, the Fire Department, everything else. You are going to have something there that no one actually can ask information, no one can post. You're just going to have information, and then there's going to be a link where they could go find out more information.
Depending on what it is, it could be linked to an article, it could be linked to a calendar, but yes, there's going to be no public commenting on this page.
Okay, that's safer. Trust me.
And we did run it by Naomi, our attorney, so she did advise on this.
Well, yeah, I put it through mine too, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Sometimes things happen, and I just want to make sure, because I'm going through it, and I just wanted to make sure I got confirmation from the AG, and they had to go, oh, look at all my posts, and I was okay, and I was able to do it. But you just got to be careful, because one comment, then you're done. You have to open up to everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Melissa, you have your hand up? No? Okay. Samantha, you?
Been up for a while, sorry.
Okay. Samantha, you were just waving your hands around too. Okay.
So I was going to give context, but I think we're good.
Okay. All right. So this is information only, and there's no capacity for people to offer opinions about our information. Right. Okay. Is there any further discussion? Okay, Maria, can we have a roll call vote?
Ms. Prince,
Yes.
Mayor Taken,
No.
Ms. Watson,
Yes.
Ms. Weason,
Yes.
Kathy Clancy,
Yes.
Mr. Favazza,
Yes.
and Chairman Pope.
Yes, it carries 6-1. And we'll move on to the next item, action item, which is to authorize the CFO to fulfill the GTA agreement to pay spring coaches. Okay, Melissa?
Sorry, I was trying to get your attention before that,
Oh.
before we moved on. I'm wondering if it would be helpful to appoint the 2 administrators tonight so that this page can be used, because I know it's been some time since the conversation started and when they're anxious to get it up.
Okay.
I know it's not on the agenda, but I don't know that it has to be because it's part of the policy.
No, it's just an appointment. Appointments don't have to be on the agenda. Are there volunteers? Who wants to do this? Besides Laura and Samantha. Seeing two volunteers in front of me.
I like those volunteers.
Melissa?
I didn't know if we needed a motion, but you can just appoint them.
I can just appoint them. I am going to appoint Samantha Watson and Laura Weason as the school committee administrators to the school committee social media page on Facebook. Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Okay, we will move on to our next action item, which is to authorize the CFO to fulfill the GTA agreement to pay spring coaches. Let's see. This arose in discussion. Naomi had a discussion with the GTA. The question was, what should we do about spring coaches? It was the income situation and the costs were reviewed by BNF. And the agreement is to pay the head coaches of spring sports 50% of their normal pay. And Kathy, remind me, did we take a vote at this on BNF?
We did not.
We did not.
I don't believe we did. Maria, did we?
I believe we did.
We did. Okay.
Just get my notes.
Okay, so if that's the
I don't
case,
think we did. I think we sent Naomi and Rich in to negotiate, and it wasn't discussed by the school committee until after, is my recollection.
no, it was discussed at BNF last week. I'm pretty
The
sure.
question was asked whether this was consistent with what the GTA had wanted, right? Wasn't that this discussion?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And Maria says we had a vote, and I know that Maria is always right about those things.
Okay, so I have the motion.
Thank you.
It was to authorize the administration to fulfill the agreement with the GTA that the head coaches of spring sports be paid 50% of their salary.
And I so move.
Okay.
Second, and thank you for that.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Okay. Roll call vote.
Ms. Prince,
Yes.
Mayor Taken,
Present.
Ms. Watson,
Yes.
Ms. Weason,
Yes.
Kathy Clancy,
Yes.
Mr. Favazza,
Yes.
and Chairman Pope.
Yes, it carries 6 in favor and 1 present. The next order of action item is to authorize the CFO to fulfill out-of-district transportation contracts. This is just another one of those things that we need to keep paying in order to keep these people functioning so that they're there when we need them. And I believe we also took a vote on this at BNF.
I have the motion if you'd like it.
Right, but I just want to say that it varied. The different companies, some of them are not responding, or one of them's not responding at all, so we're not paying them anything. Some of them we're paying, I believe, 50%, and some of them we're paying 63%. Is that correct, Gary?
61.
61, Kathy. Thank you.
Yes, if I can just add a few
163.
things here.
Please.
One, on the one that it didn't respond, they did actually respond. They didn't have their workers hired, and so they withdrew. That was one of the vendors. Another one of the vendors, I just learned this afternoon that the agreement was for them to continue the workers on their payroll, and they are on the unemployment as opposed to them maintaining their employees. So we go back to the table on one of the vendors.
Okay. All right. So in light of that new information, I would suggest that we table this item until we have full information. The purpose of paying these people is so that they would keep their employees on board and they'd be available when and if we go back to school and need them. So if they're not doing that, then we shouldn't be paying them. So without objection, can we table this? Okay. The next item is to approve the MOUs with NSAT. As you all know, last year, with the help of the union and the Tower Foundation, a pilot program was started in Gloucester in which students that were juniors, I believe, were able to do their academic work at Gloucester, and then they were transported to NSAT and did vocational training. This program was relatively successful, or at least successful to the point that they want to, NSAT wants to expand it. So this is an MOU between Gloucester and NSAT, agreeing to pay an amount of money to for each of the students that enroll. And there are 3 different programs. And I remember one is auto body.
And the other 2 are horticulture and design and communication.
Right. So these are not being supported by the union. These are separate entities. Now, the amount of money that is required, that they were going to require the school district to pay, will be essentially the difference between what the city receives for a regular student and what they receive for a vocational student, which I'm going to say is $5,100 and change.
Yeah, $5,150.
5150. So the problem is that money comes to the city, and but the bill will come to the schools.
We do have a placeholder, however, of around $37,000, and I spoke with Mr. Cook, and at this point in time, we have 3 students that are enrolled in the program next year. So I'm hoping and expecting that that the high school will be able to encourage other students. Both of these programs are designed for students who just aren't quite sure what they want to do with themselves. They are not enrolled in our vocational program. They don't necessarily have a sense of what they want to do with the future. The Craftsman is a warm embrace by the laborers union to bring these kids into the fold should they follow suit. And now they have some other options as well in what's called the After Dark program, which again, to repeat, is horticulture, design and communications, and automotive. The MOUs is actually 3, 1 for each program. It's vague. I mean, the language says the academic partners will use funds from their Chapter 74 allocation for each student enrolled in the program to cover the costs of the program. And it was vague. We didn't know how much that was, and we didn't know where the money was coming from. Last Wednesday, before the BNF meeting, we received clarification. The difference between Chapter 74, as Mr. Pope said, and Chapter 70 monies is around $51.50. But the monies for the program will have to come out of our operating budget. Last, the transportation seems to be taken care of, that there are resources for that, so the district will not have to pay for transportation.
Melissa.
Can I just ask, I see James Cook is still on with us. I'm wondering what kind of outreach was done to the students to advertise this new adventure into the other programs?
James, would you care to address that question?
Must be away from his.
Yeah. He's.
I can ask another time.
We can ask another. As far as the other piece that it needs to be understood here is that we're in control of how many students. They in the MOU it says up to 10 in each of these programs, but it's up to us if we want to cap it at any point. And as Superintendent Sapphire said, there's about $40,000 in the current budget available, so that would get roughly 8 students involved in this program. And if we have to make it appropriate or transfer some additional funds, that would have to come before the school committee. And we could make a decision at that point whether we're going to allow more students into it. It's I think it's a very good program, and I think we ought to be supporting this. But Samantha.
So I think this sounds like a great program, but I'm curious what happens if we don't go to school sort of in person in the fall? What happens then?
We've not had a chance to discuss what a remote learning situation would look like at NSET. I imagine that they have established something obviously for this year. In the previous report, there were some recommendations out of the Maryland plan, and we're going to wait to hear, it's a non-answer, but we're going to wait to hear from the Department of Ed to see how these kinds of programs can move forward and can inform you at that time.
And how will we make sure, we can only do our part to make sure our buildings are safe and being clean when we're sending kids to different districts? I guess I'm just curious what we need to do to make sure that they're not, that they're sort of complying on their end as well.
Well, I think it's in the same way that Essex Tech goes before each member district and articulates what its budget's going to be. I think that you've got the right to speak with Essex Tech to get a clear sense of what their what their plan is for opening up their buildings. And they're struggling the same way that everyone else is, and I'm sure, coming up with a plan to try to guarantee as best as possible the best hygienic conditions they can. But I see no reason why representatives from Essex Tech can't come and report out to the Gloucester School Committee.
Thank you.
Okay. Kathy?
I know with the laborers program, they were targeting, I think, juniors to participate in that. Is that similar for these programs as well?
I would say yes.
Any other discussion? Okay, Melissa, You're all set. Okay, Maria, can we have a roll call vote?
I don't believe there was a motion yet.
Oh, really?
Weren't we?
Okay,
I move that we authorize the chairman of the school committee to sign the agreement with NSEP, Essex, North Shore.
okay, that's the motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Discussion, any further discussion? Laura?
I thought that we were going to hold off until there was some clarification on some of the financial, was that?
Well, the clarification that we got is pretty much what I said. We are going to have to pay for it this year.
Okay.
And the city, the way Chapter 70 works is it's like it's a year behind. In other words, we're getting our allocation, the city's allocation of Chapter 70 money is based on the students we had last year, the number of students we had last year. And the money for these students will come in next year.
I see.
So
Okay.
we kind of have so we can talk to the city about, that we had, this is an additional expense and or whatever, but basically it's just a curious thing about the way the money flows, because, and it's probably because it's a pilot program and is not established, but the city pays, they don't pay for it, but it comes, the tuition for the students at the Essex Tech comes right off the top of Chapter 70. We never actually see the money. It doesn't come to the city and then the city writes a check. It just goes directly to Essex Tech instead of to Gloucester. And whether that will be how it will work next year may be the case.
But we don't know.
Because it's a pilot program, we could not get a clear answer about that. But either way, it's either going to come to the city as extra money or it's going to go straight to NSET.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, Maria, could we have a roll call vote?
Ms. Prince,
Absolutely, yes.
Mayor Taken,
Yes.
Ms. Watson,
Yes.
Ms. Weason,
Yes.
Kathy Clancy,
Yes.
Mr. Favazza,
Yes.
and Chairman Pope.
Yes. So it carries unanimously. Our next item is, and I have to apologize to Principal Beatty for hanging in here this long. I should have taken this up earlier. And it's about the field trip to the 8th grade field trip to Washington, D.C. And you have a request. Of course, they're not going. So Lynn, if you would like to just explain the situation to us.
Sure. This is for the trip for next spring for 2021. And normally our practice has been to book the trip at least a year ahead as soon as we get back from the trip that was completed, so that families have time to make payments. Given our current circumstances, I originally was ready to commit. We have families that have vouchers they're holding from this year's trip that was canceled. So the original idea was to transfer or facilitate a transfer between our 8th grade families and our 7th grade families, so that because Education First relaxed their policy and did provide an opportunity for 100% refund. So that would benefit them the most. With the refund situation, if those families just wanted the refund back, just last week, actually, Education First was, I don't know whether they were required to, but they did, based on a complaint with the Attorney General's office, or the DA's office, excuse me. change the loss that families would face. Originally they would lose, there was no refund, and then they changed the policy to provide a refund less $250 operating expenses. And just last Thursday, they called me and said that they had reduced that loss. So our current families, if they take a refund, will lose $150. This is a really hard decision because I don't want families losing $150. I don't want them losing any dollars. On the flip side, though, I'm trying to think about next year and the situation that we're in. And I have zero comfort with booking a trip to put another set of families in this predicament next year. If we wait, they will hold dates, but the cost will go up. The cost is already almost $100 more for next year's trip than it was for this year's to be. And so, I'm sort of choosing between, do I put another group of families in a position? Who knows how many 7th grade families will be willing to book a trip like this and commit to the finances given our circumstances and all the unknowns about trips. So I'm not even sure that the 8th grade families who currently hold vouchers will find matches to be able to transfer their vouchers over to 7th grade families. So I'm trying to think through the best way to minimize the loss to any of our families, and obviously primarily to keep our kids safe. And the only solution that I've come up with is to not book the trip. If magically everything were to change and we could get a reasonable price and book in the fall, even that, I think some of our families would have difficulty with, because as I said, we book a year ahead so that people can make payments for the year. And so we can run numerous fundraising events to defray the cost of the trip for those who can't afford it. The intent of the trip is to be a community trip that combines national history and exposure to DC that kids might not ordinarily have. This year we would have had 60 kids staying back. Last year we had 40 kids staying back. That's a lot of kids that stay back for a trip that's supposed to be a closure community event. So these are all different tangents of the components of the decision. So I'm requesting, instead of approval to run a trip next year, approval to cancel the trip for next year, which means that the families who are currently holding vouchers would each lose $150. So it's not a request I make lightly. But I'm afraid that if we go forward, we may face a greater loss for other families or for these families who might not be able to transfer the voucher if a trip in the end can't occur.
So I'd just like to ask, so if the vouchers that they offered to the people who had paid in full was for the full amount. In other words, if they could use them, they didn't lose any money.
Yes, in the end, that's what they ended up with. That's not their original policy.
But you said it cost $100 more than this year. So even if they have a voucher, are they, required to pay an additional $100?
Well, the 7th grade family would. So if an 8th grade family has a voucher and we facilitate matching up families who have a voucher with those who want to purchase a voucher, the 7th grade family would be able to use the dollar amount that they bought from the 8th grade family, put it toward their trip, and then pay the difference.
Okay, now the other thing that I may be wrong about this because I wasn't paying 100% attention, but it was my understanding that there was some legislation passed that people had to refund full amounts of money. Does anybody know more about that than I do?
I don't know anymore, but I did read that as well, just in the past few days.
Okay. So that all has to be sorted out, the money, but what you're asking for is to cancel the trip. Correct, Lynn?
Yes, and with regard to the legislation piece, the only news that I have on it is that Education First in particular has been asked to refund more money than they were going to, but I don't have an understanding that they're refunding the whole cost.
Joel?
Has there been, or what's been the discussion about the concept of, you know, letting the children go as 9th graders instead of 8th graders? Again, in this world where we figure something out in the spring, they're allowing people to, you know, take these trips. I'm curious in the other direction, rather than trying to figure out whether you link these families up and have the 7th grade families pay extra money. If, you know, if all these current 8th graders to be 9th graders are holding on to these vouchers and, you know, things go well, is there anything that says, you know, they couldn't take a 9th grade trip to DC?
No, and actually James and I briefly talked about this. They have a number of other events and activities that go on for the 9th graders. So we didn't explore that very deeply. The vouchers, by the way, are good through September 30th, 2022. So it could be next year, or if families chose to hold the vouchers, they could potentially transfer them the following year if things cleared up. I don't know whether families would choose to do that or whether they would decide to take the $150 loss and be done with it. You know, but that is certainly another option if we were to the following year be able to feel confident that we could run a safe trip.
Melissa? You're muted. We're not hearing you.
Sorry. No, sorry, I was muted. So I'm reading online that this is May 21st, that the Attorney General secured $1.4 million in refunds for these trips through EF Tours.
Yes.
And that money is going to be rolled out starting on Friday.
Right. And that's the 100. So originally EF changed their policy from no refund at all to refund less $250 for the kind of trip that we have, a bus trip. It's all families would get an additional $100 back.
But I thought there was brought up, I thought there was a law or some regulation in place that any cancellations due to COVID was a state of emergency and that they had to refund 100%.
Not that I'm aware of or that they've responded to. So I have that same information that you have from Maura Healy's office.
Okay. Yeah.
So, but the question before us is whether to cancel the trip for next year. And the implication of canceling it is that that the people that are holding these vouchers will have nothing to do with them. They'll have no real, or they could hold them. Correct me if I'm wrong, Lynn. They could hold them for 2 years, and perhaps 2 years from now there might be a trip to Washington D.C. and they could be used. Is that correct?
Potentially, yes. That's correct. They also can use those vouchers for any other trip. So if the high school was running a trip through Education First, or if a family chose to enroll their child in one of EF's other opportunities, they do summer kinds of things and a variety of things around the world, they would be able to use the voucher toward that as well. I don't know what the likelihood of that is, so it's not something that I want to bank a decision on.
But what's before us is to just eliminate the possibility that they could use them for an O'Malley trip next year.
Right.
Right. Kathy?
Jonathan, I think what's before us is supporting Lynn and her in her dilemma or decision that this educational event is not a good thing to make a commitment on right now. And so when you get to families who really think this is, something their kid has looked forward to or whatever, this may not be, no one wants to make a decision that takes away an opportunity. But in this situation, it would be difficult for Lynn as a principal or for us even as a school committee to say that families should start making those payments and making those commitments. I think the decision is a very prudent one, given the uncertainty, because we don't know how things will progress over the next 11 months to even know if they'd be even able to get on a bus. So I would be, you know, unfortunately, it's a terrific trip for kids to take, but I think the decision would be a wise one not to put the school or the families out on a limb financially.
Safafia?
Yeah, I have a question. Did we ask the parents?
We have not yet.
So we're taking about a vote that we don't know what the decision wants. We have the robo, you have the talking to them, because I know a lot of people saying, what about our monies? What about everything else? Same thing with prom. And I mean, right now, money's tight with everyone. So $150 loss or $100 loss is better than having the whole, the loss completely. So thank you for all your outreach and all of that to stay on top of that with the Attorney General to at least get that reimbursed. But you know what? Why don't we ask them? I mean, you know what? It's just send an email out and we'll vote on it next time. Or you could say, you know what? Our parents decided that, you know what? We don't think there's going to be a vaccine in 11 months and only 10 students to a bus or whatever. It's going to be lost. And for us to make that decision, when it's not our money financially, it's theirs. And a lot of them don't want to go. And a lot of them are having hardships that they don't even want to do sports. They want their money back from the little leagues. I'm getting all that back. I don't have $300, or some of them have 2 children that are going to be going because of the circumstances of their children. So, you know what? Does it have to be that we have to make this decision tonight?
No, absolutely not.
So send out whatever you send out to all your 8th graders, whatever, and then the future ones who, do you want to postpone it? Would you want to keep the voucher, or do you want it? And this is the loss that you will get. And most likely, I mean, explain to them, 11 months is 11 months. I don't see us going to Washington. I don't see anyone taking a bus tour to go to Washington, or even if there was a bus tour, I don't see parents. You already saw how many are going now. I don't see parents saying, I'm going to take that bus and put my kid on a bus without what's going on in society, vaccines, the whole thing. So, I mean, unfortunately, right now, I don't see anyone taking big, long trips with groups. So I would still send an email out and ask them what you want to do, and here are the scenarios. In my opinion.
Okay, is there any, you said there's no time sensitivity to this decision, Lynn?
There is and there isn't. So I don't need a decision tonight. I would probably do, as the mayor suggested, I would send to both the 8th grade families and the 7th grade families to see what kind of a commitment we have. If, you know, if there are only 25 7th grade families who are willing to do this, in essence, the 8th grade families would be in the same situation with not being able to transfer their vouchers next year anyway. So we can get that information. The challenge is that the cost will go up for the next year's trip. I don't know when, but I do know when I asked the rep if, you know, how long they would hold the dates. So the contract we have right now, the proposal we have right now, not a contract, is up at the end of this month. They would write another one. And, you know, this is the lowest cost. So I don't know how much it goes up every time we push it out. But we can certainly, you know, see how that goes. And I can get the information from families as soon as possible.
Melissa?
I just wanted to say I dug a little bit more and I sent a link to Lynn that there was a Massachusetts bill went before the Committee on Consumer Protection and Professional Licensure today. So, and it says there's 30 legislative co-sponsors. So there's obviously something going on about this reimbursement. So I sent you the link, Lynn, so you can see it.
Thank you. Yeah, I know there are a lot of people who are rightfully very upset about this situation. And it's been a difficult one. So,
Yeah.
okay. Thank you very much.
There's no knowing what things are going to be 11 months from now. So without objection, we'll table this item.
Thank you very much.
Our next meeting, and thank you, Lynn.
Okay, sure.
And we'll move on in the agenda. The next item is MSBA. There's not a lot to report. The last meeting of the school building committee, they essentially approved what is going to be priced out by the estimators, and they also approved for the city to go forward with entering in a contract with W.T. Rich as the construction manager at risk for this project. So those are the two items. Things will be quiet until June 23rd and 24th, at which time they're going to come back with all the numbers. They're going to have their submittal to MSBA for the schematic design approved by the building committee on the 23rd, and it will come to the school committee on the 24th, and it will be submitted shortly thereafter. So that's what's happening. Melissa?
While you're talking about the building project, there seems to be a little scuttlebutt or a perception in the community that if the community members that don't support the project being at Veterans Memorial School site can persuade a vote to vote that project down on that site, there's a belief that the project can still go forward at Green Street. So I know you've said in the past that that probably couldn't happen, but I just wanted to clarify it because there is some talk out there, and I don't want the community members that are in opposition to veterans to have this this notion that that the site could be changed. It's my understanding it's either yes vets or no school, and I just wanted to get some clarification on that, please.
Okay. You're absolutely right. Essentially, the Article 97 before the state legislature, when it's passed, and I've gotten different messages about whether it's passed or not, but it came out of committee with a positive approval to the full legislature. I had thought that it had gone through the legislature, but it appears that it hasn't quite yet. But once that's passed, it will come back to the city, and the city council will have to vote to transfer the property from the DPW, which currently is in possession of it, to the school department. For us to get approval of the schematic design, we have to be in possession of the property. The school department has to be in possession of the property, and the date for that is, I may be wrong about this, but it's late in August 23rd or 24th or something like that. So if the city does not transfer the property, MSBA cannot approve the schematic design if we don't have possession of the property. And if they cannot approve the schematic design, that's it, it's over. There's no do-over. There's no, well, we want to change this plan, because we would have to go back into the queue, present a statement of interest, and get the money appropriated. So the city has invested $1 million in this project so far. So that would be lost. And we would be starting from scratch if we don't have possession of the property. Joel?
Yeah, I'm a little confused at that point. I went back and was reading through the meeting minutes for West Parish, and we're a little further along the process, but essentially at this point in the West Parish process, you all thought you were going to be building it down on the field, keeping the old school up. And then as part of kind of this area of where we are now in the process, it became an, oh no, we can't build the school down there. And it was kind of this scramble. And all of a sudden, you know, swing space was in and demolition of the school. The whole plan changed. And we didn't get knocked out of the queue. And we didn't get, you know, sent back to square one. But the design that had been talked about, which was building on the field, keeping the old.
Joe, it's totally different. You didn't get a debt shift. We paid for it and the city's paid for it. Totally different. Totally different.
So anyway, so
I'm just letting you know.
Thank you, stop it. So we were at this point in the process, or a little earlier in this, but still we were in that, you know, about getting the schematic design ready for approval. And as part of the geotech, you know, due diligence, it came kind of late that, oh no, we have to move this off the field. And so the planning got changed and we didn't get, you know, scuttled, right? And so again, my understanding is if veterans wasn't available, we'd still have the ability to pick up this design and put it on a different site and still hit that target, because MSBA doesn't care where it necessarily goes. It just cares that you can do it where you're looking to do it. It's how we got away with West Parish needing to get changed last minute with moving it up the hill.
The site that of veterans was submitted to MSBA as the during the preferred schematic report, which is our last submittal to MSBA. The site is locked in as far as they're concerned. The site didn't change at the location of the building on the site changed at West Parish, but the site did not change. You know, as far as the swing space goes, that's something that MSBA really doesn't care about. They don't reimburse it. They have no dog in that fight. You know, we have to pick up the cost of swing space, and we had to at West Parish. So they don't. If that's not something that they can concern themselves with. The other thing to keep in mind is MSBA receives 1% of sales tax. The money that is committed to this project is in place. If we get pushed back, there's no guarantee that the next year's allocation are going to be the same, that the reimbursement rates are going to be the same, and or the amount of projects that they're going to accept is going to be the same. Chances are very good that they're not going to have as much money to commit to school building projects that they have already committed to. So there's a lot of things in play right here. Joel?
You forget you're asking the voters, you're asking the residents. You cannot put a question on the ballot and say we are doing a school at veterans and this is the way we're doing it. Will you approve it? And then all of a sudden say again we need to change it. You have to go again for another vote. The first time you could have done whatever you wanted because it wasn't a debt shift. It wasn't nothing else. Kirk said we're doing a school. You guys didn't even know who were on the school committee. Next thing you know, the city side paid for it. And that's how it went. And that's, you know what? We'll have to, first let's see what happens there. And then you have to see what you're going to put on the ballot because it's a ballot question.
So
Melissa?
You called on me and then the mayor began talking.
All right.
So to go back to my comparison, the correct comparison would be to say that so long as it was still on this site, if we, for whatever reason, had to redesign, I'm not saying that makes anything better, but if we had to redesign the orientation on this site, that would be akin to the last minute redesign of West Parish, and that would not knock us off the MSBA track because we'd still be on the same selected site. It would only be removing it from this site that would knock you off of the MSBA track. That's how West Parish was able to do a last minute change, and this one would not be able to unless it was solely changing on the site itself.
Okay. Melissa, you had your hand up? Okay. Kathy?
I guess I just want to correct the characterization that West Parish happened at the last minute. West Parish happened along the process of which they were examining the geotechnical on the site. So it wasn't it wasn't at the last, you know, it wasn't so far down the path. It was along the path that we've been on now with veterans, where you're doing those investigations. And so it's one of those things, you just need the, you know, the questions out there, and then the answer came in, and that's when it shifted.
Rich, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I would like to check with Jordan Whittier. I cannot imagine that a geological shift in the location on site could possibly have gone after the preliminary schematic report. All that work is done on the front end. It seems, it's incredible to me to look back and think that they would have changed location on site in time to send in a full schematic report, a design rather, with costs and everything else. It's just not plausible. So I'd like to verify that with Jordan Whittier.
Safafi, you still have your hand up?
Their hand was from way before, so I apologize.
Okay, all right, no problem. Melissa?
Yeah, so my memory is what Kathy's is. I mean, we were doing an investigation into the site and then learned that there was clay in the back and that we couldn't build the way we wanted to, and that we had not approved a lot of plans before that happened. I think it happened in conjunction while we were doing the schematic design. We then learned about the clay and realized that we couldn't do what we wanted to do. So it's not even a matter of it's not
we're a step beyond
West
that.
Harris.
Right. Yeah, West Parish. So you're saying it was one step earlier. We're already past that step. It wasn't prior to this decision. It was prior to the last decision in the process.
Right. I mean, it was early in the process that we changed it, knowing we couldn't do what we wanted to do. So that's a little different than my concern, which is people thinking we can change the site. You know, we didn't change the West Parish plan because we wanted to. We changed it because we had to. We didn't have a choice. But my concern is there's people in the community that think that if this gets voted down in some capacity, that we can just move on to Green Street and still keep the MSBA project money under this project, which I have to believe is not the case. And I just wanted to get that confirmation for those out there that are plotting and planning.
Any further discussion on this? Okay, that concludes our agenda. I will note that there is in the packet a number of meeting minutes of the school building committee. A request had been made that we include these in the packet. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 sets of minutes. So they will, in the future, they will be included in the school committee packet as they are approved by the building committee. Samantha.
Just one other sort of suggestion, and anybody can object, but I'm curious what people's thoughts are. As Rich was saying that in the next 2 weeks, we're probably going to get some recommendations from the state on what next year is going to look like. Plus, we're going to probably be hiring a new superintendent in that time frame. Do you think it's wise that going forward we start to meet again weekly to get a pulse on what's happening? I don't know what people's thoughts are.
Well, as far as meetings go, I have a feeling that we are going to have a number of meetings next week, a substantial number of meetings next week between 2 site visits there, 2 site visits here, and then 2 interviews.
Sorry, I didn't mean for next week. I just meant once the recommendations come forward, if we.
Well, let's just see whether there's something to report out on. But we'll meet right now. I'm assuming we're going to meet in 2 weeks from tonight. And although we're going to have all these meetings next week. So, Laura, you had your hand up.
I just noticed in the packet, along with the minutes from the building committee, were also a whole bunch of invoices and bills. I just wanted to, is that just because that's part of the
That's part of the building committee's work that they do. They approve the bills and they approve each invoice.
Okay, I just wasn't sure if, how to read those, so.
Okay. Well, that's what they are. Joel?
Just as a thing of new business, there was a discussion at BNF a couple meetings ago when the DPW director, Mike Hale, was present, and the topic of the MOU came up and kind of the gray areas and kind of what he characterized as, interesting divisions where the DPW maintains one set of things and the school department, like, I think we still do blinds, was it blinds and shades are still in the school department, but windows are obviously a part of the DPW. And so I'd like to either refer out to BNF or bring back to the committee, the idea of reworking the MOU to try and get rid of these gray areas and make some delineations that make more sense, that DPW just has, control of the facility in the same way they'd have control of other facilities in the city. It seems like everyone seems to be on board with what the work they do so far. And so I don't know that it'd be bad to give them the ability to kind of close the loop on that.
Okay. So what you're saying is that we should refer review of the MOU to BNF. Okay.
Sure.
No problem. Kathy? No, there's no problem with that. Okay, we can do that. Just for the record, we do not have an MOU that's been agreed to with DPW. We have not reviewed it for a number of years because DPW objected to, I think, as I recall, the main argument was that we wanted to have priority for our teams at the rink, and somehow how the rink is managed is in the MOU. So there's a lot to look at, and those issues that what a clear delineation between what is the school's responsibilities and what is the DPW's responsibilities can't hurt. So let's do it. Melissa, you have your hand up?
Yeah, it's just something to refer to BNF. I just want to make sure you were done with this topic. So just wanted to let the committee know the nurses have asked us to go back into negotiations, so that's something we're going to be doing this week. The contract is for next year, not this year, or actually this year because we're already in this, July 1st. Yeah. So I'm thinking with all that's going on in the world and your messaging earlier about the budget, and we're going to be making tough decisions over the next couple of weeks, I think it would be great that BNF in an executive session discuss how the major economic downturn over the next couple of years is going to impact our negotiations. So we do have some contracts that are expired. We're going to be doing gates. We're doing the nurses, and I think there's a few others. So I think BNF should have that discussion about what they project we will have available, if anything, to negotiate with. So we're going to need that guidance from BNF as we begin these conversations, and probably even sooner when we meet with the nurses next week or the week after. Okay. So something to think about to provide us guidance on.
The other thing before the BNF, besides the MOU and the future of humanity on Earth, is the budget that we've got to deal with for next year. Next week is June. We need to have a balanced budget. If the city passes theirs, we need to be able to balance our budget by the end of the month. So BNF's got some work to do. Perhaps we can talk about trying to fit fitting a meeting in before the normal date, which would be 2 weeks from today, right? Kathy will take a look at the dates and see if we can't get something sooner than that. Okay?
Sure.
All right. Anything else? Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Maria, can we have a roll call vote?
Ms. Prince,
Yes.
Mayor Taken,
Yes.
Ms. Watson,
Yes.
Ms. Weason,
Yes.
Kathy Clancy,
Yes.
Mr. Favazza,
Yes.
and Chairman Pope.
Yes, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much. And we'll be seeing a lot of each other next week. Thank you.
Good night, all.
Night.
Good night.